The morning sunlight spilled across the wide windows of my penthouse, brushing over the sleek marble floors and the delicate scent of fresh peonies. I straightened the cuffs of my silk blouse, the soft fabric sliding against my skin, and sipped the coffee that steamed in my favorite china cup. From the outside, my life looked perfect, the kind of elegance you only see in magazines. But perfection is often a mask. My phone buzzed on the marble countertop, and I saw the name that made my chest tighten: Harrison's family. I froze, the smooth surface of the cup cool against my lips as memories I had tucked away surged up. They thought I had crumbled when they vandalized the house, when they mocked me behind my back, when they tried to destroy everything I loved. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know how far I had come. I glanced at the living room, at the art I had carefully curated, at the furniture I had chosen after months of research, at the delicate chandelier that sparkled like tiny stars. Every piece told a story, a quiet rebellion against the life they tried to impose on me. My fingers drummed against the counter as I debated answering the call. Curiosity battled caution. Pain mingled with pride. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of amusement flickered. They had no idea who they were about to meet. I took a deep breath, feeling the smooth silk of my blouse under my palms, and pressed the green button. "Hello," I said, my voice calm, confident, but ready. It all began a few years earlier, when I had first stepped into the house that Harrison and I would call home. I was younger then, full of hope and excitement, convinced that love could conquer anything. I poured my heart into decorating every room, from the velvet drapes in the living room to the hand-painted tiles in the kitchen. Each corner reflected my taste, my effort, my dreams. But the excitement didn't last. Harrison's family, particularly his older sister, Vanessa, and his mother, Margaret, seemed determined to crush it. "Why did you choose that color?" Vanessa sneered one afternoon, kicking a small sculpture I had spent hours sculpting. Margaret shook her head, muttering about wasted money, about how I was too ambitious for my own good. The sting in my chest was sharp, the lump in my throat growing heavier with each passing word. My hands trembled as I tried to steady the vase they had just knocked over. I remembered standing in the ruined living room that night, tears stinging my eyes, watching the furniture they had pushed, the paintings they had scratched. I felt small, humiliated, powerless. Harrison tried to intervene, but his words were weak against their judgment. I wanted to scream, to beg, to make them see me, but nothing could reach their arrogance. It was my grandmother, a woman of quiet strength, who called me that night. Her voice, warm and unwavering, reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten. "Sophia," she said, "no one can take your heart's work unless you let them. You have talent, you have vision. Guard it. Protect it. Build it for yourself." That night, I made a decision. I packed my favorite designs, sketches, and tools into a small, sturdy leather bag, the same one my grandmother had given me with a note tucked inside. "Your dreams are your armor. Wear them well." I didn't know exactly how I would succeed, but I knew I couldn't stay in the house waiting for permission or validation. I would stand alone if I had to, and I would prove that my life wasn't theirs to ruin. As I closed the door behind me, leaving the vandalized home and their sneers behind, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was the beginning of something else, something that would become entirely mine. I remember the first night I stayed in my small, rented studio apartment, the leather bag from my grandmother resting beside me. The city lights flickered through the window, a quiet promise that the world outside was vast, full of possibility. I spread out my sketches, my designs, and let myself imagine a life where my work wasn't mocked, where my vision mattered. The early days were brutal. I had no network, no financial cushion beyond the insurance payout from the vandalized house, and every doubt I'd ever felt threatened to creep in. But I remembered my grandmother's words, "Your dreams are your armor." Each morning, I dressed deliberately, even if no one would see me, a silk blouse, pressed trousers, as if my confidence could be sewn into my very skin. It was during one of these mornings that I met Lucas Harper, a seasoned interior designer known for transforming overlooked spaces into luxurious escapes. He was reviewing portfolios at a small studio in downtown Chicago, and something in my sketches caught his eye. "You have an eye," he said, his voice calm but full of curiosity. "Do you want to learn how to turn these ideas into a real business?" Under Lucas's mentorship, I learned more than just design. I learned negotiation, client management, the subtle art of presentation. Nights blurred into mornings as I pored over color palettes, textures, and blueprints, sometimes faintly smelling of the espresso I drank to keep my eyes open. There were failures, a client rejecting a design, a supplier missing a deadline, moments where I questioned if I was cut out for this. But then came the small victories. The first client who trusted me with their downtown loft. The first sale that netted enough to pay rent and invest in better tools. The first time I walked into a finished room, perfectly lit, perfectly aligned, knowing every detail had come from my own hands. Each win, though quiet and uncelebrated, felt monumental. I learned to keep my life carefully compartmentalized. Harrison's family would see only social media snapshots, casual brunches, neutral photos of projects, nothing hinting at the empire I was quietly building. I smiled politely when their calls came, masking my excitement with calm indifference, knowing the time would come when they'd see the full picture. Evenings in my studio became sacred. I'd light a vanilla candle, put on soft jazz, and review my progress. The leather bag sat in the corner as a constant reminder I hadn't just survived there. Cruelty, I had learned to transform it into fuel. Each design, each project, was a silent declaration that I was no longer the woman who trembled at their opinions. I was someone entirely my own. And slowly, the city began to notice. My name, Sophia Bennett, began appearing on small design blogs, then local magazines, then high-end lifestyle publications. And I kept moving forward, always forward, with quiet satisfaction knowing my real triumph was yet to come. The knock at the door was deliberate, confident, like someone who thought they still held power here. I straightened my blouse, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the entrance, the marble cool beneath my feet. When I opened the door, there they were, Vanessa, Margaret, and even Harrison, their faces a mix of curiosity, expectation, and subtle smugness. They had come expecting to see a woman who had faltered, someone broken, perhaps humbled by life. Instead, they were met with Sophia Bennett in full command. My apartment greeted them first, a symphony of subtle lighting, carefully curated art, a velvet chaise that invited them to sit, a crystal chandelier catching the morning sun in a way that made the space glow. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft aroma of white lilies on the table. Every detail, each painting, each piece of furniture, was a testament to my vision, my taste, and my journey. They stepped in cautiously, as if entering sacred territory. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. Margaret's eyes darted around, disbelief written across every wrinkle of her face. Harrison's jaw tightened. I offered them a smile, calm, warm, but with an undercurrent of steel. "Welcome," I said, my voice carrying the weight of years of struggle and triumph. "I'm glad you could make it." They moved further into the living room, absorbing every detail. I let them linger, letting the suspense build. The silence stretched, thick with expectation and discomfort. And then I spoke again, letting the truth land softly, but irrevocably. "I know what you think," I began, pacing lightly across the polished floor. "You think I failed after the incident. You think I struggled, that I needed saving. But here I am. This is my home, my design, my creation. The insurance payout you thought was my defeat became the foundation of my independence. Every detail you see is the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and vision." Vanessa's eyes widened. Margaret's mouth fell slightly open. Harrison's face shifted from surprise to awe, the realization slowly dawning. I guided them through the apartment, pausing to let each room speak for itself. The home was more than luxury. It was a narrative of resilience. The kitchen, spotless and elegant, symbolized my precision and care. The library, lined with rare books and framed sketches, represented knowledge and growth. The living room, with its velvet accents and artful lighting, told the story of transformation, of a woman who refused to be diminished. Finally, I stopped at the center of the space, where the chandelier scattered diamonds of light across the room. "This isn't just a house," I said softly but with conviction. "It's a declaration. I am not who you thought I was. I am stronger, independent, and fully capable of creating a life that belongs to me, not to your judgments or interference." They stood there, stunned, caught between shame, admiration, and disbelief. Vanessa's hands twitched at her sides, Margaret's lips pressed together, and Harrison's eyes met mine with a mix of pride and astonishment. For the first time, they realized the woman they had tried to undermine was now untouchable, untouchable by their doubt, their cruelty, their past arrogance. And I smiled, a small, triumphant curve of my lips, letting the truth sink in. The confrontation wasn't loud or vengeful. It was quiet, elegant, and undeniably final. I had arrived. They had arrived. And the power balance had irrevocably shifted. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of control resting squarely in my hands. Harrison's family had expected a humbled, apologetic Sophia. Instead, they found someone who not only survived their cruelty, but thrived because of it. And now it was time to define the rules, to ensure that the past could never repeat itself. I gestured toward the living room, letting the sunlight spill over the polished floors. "Before we continue, there are a few things you need to understand," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This isn't about punishment. It's about respect, growth, and accountability." Vanessa looked at me warily, her arms crossed. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Harrison, though, stood quietly, waiting. I took a deep breath. "Vanessa," I began, "if you want to be part of my life, you must leave the jealousy and control behind. You need to find your own passions and respect the work of others, even if it's not your taste. I will not allow criticism that is rooted in envy or insecurity." I turned to Margaret. "Mother, you need to learn to support without judgment. You have a history of imposing opinions as authority. From now on, any interaction must come from respect, not control. You are welcome here only if you approach me as an equal, not as someone who can belittle or undermine me." Harrison's face softened as I spoke, and I reached him last. "Harrison, I love the family you come from, but I will not allow past interference to compromise my life. I want you as a partner, as an ally, someone who supports me and our shared goals. No more silence when boundaries are crossed. We move forward together, or we don't move at all." The room was quiet, heavy with the gravity of what I'd said. I could feel their hesitation, the old patterns fighting against this new reality. But I also felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that change was possible if they were willing to meet me halfway. Then, I added one final point, softening the tone, letting warmth creep into my words. "I am not unforgiving. I care for each of you, and I want us to have meaningful relationships. But my growth, my peace, and my home are non-negotiable. You may be part of this life only if you are willing to respect it and respect me." As I spoke, I noticed subtle shifts. Vanessa's arms uncrossed slightly, Margaret's eyes moistened, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Harrison nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that we were all entering a new chapter. I realized in that moment that power wasn't about revenge. It was about setting boundaries, defining your worth, and allowing others the chance to rise to it. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not for the version of me they had wanted, but for the woman I had become. And in that living room, bathed in morning light, I understood. The past no longer had the power to define me. I did. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and slowly, the changes began. Vanessa started taking art classes she had long dismissed, learning to channel her energy into something creative rather than critical. Margaret joined a local volunteer group, discovering a sense of purpose outside the confines of judgment and control. Harrison, steadfast and supportive, became a true partner, attentive, respectful, and proud of the life we were building together. I watched these changes quietly, sipping my morning coffee in the living room that had once been a battlefield and was now a sanctuary. Every detail, the soft cream rug, the warm glow of the chandelier, the vase of peonies on the table, felt like a testament not just to my taste, but to the journey I had taken to reach this place of strength. And in my mind, I saw the leather bag from my grandmother, tucked away in the corner of my studio apartment in those early days. "Your dreams are your armor," she had said. How true those words had been. That small gift, her unwavering belief, had been the spark that ignited years of effort, perseverance, and self-discovery. Every night spent designing, every setback endured, every quiet victory, it all traced back to that moment of guidance, a reminder that the only limits were the ones I allowed. Now I could finally exhale. I had reclaimed my life, my home, my sense of self. I had transformed the remnants of destruction into a space of beauty, confidence, and grace. And more importantly, I had transformed myself. Standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline, I felt the sun warming my face. I realized that the luxury around me, the decor, the art, the elegance, was not what defined my victory. It was the woman I had become, resilient, independent, unapologetically strong, yet capable of compassion. With a small, satisfied smile, I whispered to myself, the words rolling smoothly off my tongue, ready for anyone who would listen. I am the architect of my own life, and nothing, not cruelty, not doubt, not anyone else, will ever take that from me again. In that moment, I understood. My journey had been more than survival, it had been transformation. And the life I had built, my life, my home, my rules, was the most beautiful declaration of all.